Hello everyone, it's Mafalda and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm bringing you another end of the year video, and I'm going to be talking about the most surprising books that I read in 2021. And these are not like the best books that I read this year. Well, some of these I could include in my best books, but I'm not going to talk about them in my best books. Just saying that my best books of 2021 is still coming, the video. But I decided to make this video because this year in 2021, I feel like I really stepped out of my comfort zone and I picked up books that I normally probably wouldn't, and there were a lot of books that I picked up on a whim. I think most of these books I read as audiobooks. Some of them I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, so it was just like, oh, let me listen to this and see what it's like. And some of them I was just like not expecting to like as much as I did. And so yeah, these are books that I just picked up on a whim and they really surprised me. And some of these I liked so much that I ended up giving them 5 stars, and I could include them in my favorites of the year, but I don't want to repeat books. So yeah, I just decided to make a separate video talking about surprising books that I read this year and that I really liked. So let's get started. So the first book that I want to talk about is one that I read as an ARC. Actually, I got an ARC off of NetGalley. I request a lot of books on NetGalley, and normally I'm surprised by the books because I don't like them as much as I thought I would. But this one, I was expecting to like it, but I wasn't expecting to love it, and that's what ended up happening. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and it was just such a great start to the year because I read this in February, I think. That's when the book came out, and it was Nubia, Real One by L.L. McKinney. I've talked about this book quite a lot on my channel, and yeah, this was initially I got an ARC, like not a physical ARC. I ended up getting a physical copy after I read the book, but I had like an ARC on NetGalley and I read it and I was just like so in love with the character and the story and the art. The art of this is absolutely gorgeous and amazing, and this is a DC comic about Nubia, who is a superhero. This is such an interesting story with so many great and important topics thrown in here, like police brutality and school shootings, and I just loved I just loved Nubia as a character so much, and I really hope there is like a continuation to this series because this is obviously meant to be a series of books, and I really hope we get a second volume because I just loved this so much. And also I feel like this is really underrated. Like, I don't know a lot of people who have read this book, and I just really want more people to pick this one up. This is a graphic novel. You can read it in like an hour or something, and it's just like gorgeous and so important. So yeah, this one really surprised me because most NetGalley ARCs that I got are not that good, to be honest. I just don't have a lot of luck with that. So yeah, this was the first one that I really loved, and I gave a clear 5 star, and yeah. Now the next book that I want to talk about, I feel like I already also discussed this one a lot on my channel, but it's Kim Ji-young, Born 1982 by Choo Nam-joo, and this book I picked up as an audiobook because it was a short audiobook. I think it was like 4 hours or something, and I just wanted something short to listen to, so I decided to pick this one up, and it was such an interesting book that immediately right after I finished the book I ordered a copy for myself, also because this edition of the book is beautiful. I love it so much. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Like the title says, this is a story about Kim Ji-young, born 1982, and she is a girl living in Korea, and basically we follow her all throughout her life, and basically we see how it is to live as a woman in Korea. This is a very feminist book, and basically we follow this woman and we see all the injustices that she goes through and all of the things that she goes through then compared to a man, like the men in her life. Like, for example, when she's little, she has to share a room with her sister while her brother gets his own room because he's a man. Then we see her have to give up her career down the line because she wants to raise a family, and in Korea there aren't a lot of like benefits and help for young women who want to raise families, so basically all women have to quit their jobs, and it's a really eye-opening story. I feel like this is a fiction book, but it also could be considered as kind of a non-fiction book. It has some like facts and like stats thrown into the story as we go, just like real world facts about living in Korea as a woman. Even though it's like 100 or something pages, it really packs a punch, and you're just thrown into these situations with Kim Ji-young, and you're just like, why is life like this? And even though this book is set in South Korea, I think it could be applied to most places in the world, because living as a woman is still not easy in a lot of countries and a lot of places in the world. I feel like anyone could read this and take something out of it. It was a really surprising read because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this book, and so I was just really surprised when I ended up loving the audiobook. So yeah, that's another one. Now the next book on this list is probably the least surprising book of this whole list, because a lot of people love this book and that's why I picked it up, but still I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I do now, especially, and it's The Death of Vivekoji by Kwaki and Medi. I read this book, I think, I listened to the audiobook in January, I think, and then I decided that I wanted to do a whole essay on this book for school. I ended up doing like a 15-page essay on this book, and it was just so fun, and I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars when I first read it, but now it's just like a complete 5 stars for me. I just adored this book, especially after analyzing it so much and rereading passages of the book so much. Kwaki and Medi is definitely an author that I need to like read more of their books, because I just like the writing in this. Oh my god, it's beautiful. But this book is set in Nigeria and it follows the life of Vivekoji, but at the beginning of the book we know that Vivekoji has died, and we just don't know why and how, and then all throughout the book it's finding out more about Vivekoji, especially through the eyes of the people around him, his family and friends. And this is a book about identity and sexuality, and I just loved learning more about these characters. I loved the writing, and the audiobook was also great because I initially picked this one up as an audiobook and it was also great, and I just adored the story. It's also pretty short, which I love, and it really is beautiful. It's a beautiful book. I really love the message and I really love the ending, and I love all the characters, even though they're all flawed and they all make mistakes all throughout the book. I just adore it so much. And doing an essay on this book for school was the best idea I ever had, because I was able to reread the book and really fall even more in love with the story and the characters, and I just loved my time with this book. So yeah, this was a really surprising read, probably the least surprising, because a lot of people that I'm subscribed to on YouTube were already raving about this book when I first picked it up. So now the next book that I wanted to mention in this list is Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Balikar Juswell, and this one I also picked it up as an audiobook, and this book was probably one of the funnest experiences I had with the book this year. Not the funniest, but like I just had so much fun reading this book. And this book is set in London, and it follows our main character Nikki, who decides to teach a creative writing class in a community center to a bunch of Punjabi widows. And when she gets there, she realizes that those Punjabi widows can't read and write. And then she, instead of like teaching them how to write and read, she decides to start a erotic story workshop, because one of the Punjabi widows one day finds an erotic book from Nikki, and basically the Punjabi widows are all like fascinated by the erotic story, and so they decide to start writing their own stories. This was such a fun book, like I said, but it also talks about really important stuff. It really talks about the differences between the East and the West and the Punjabi culture, and just like the differences between generations, because then the rumor starts to spread about these erotic stories in the Punjabi community, and some people are not okay with that. And it's a really fun story, but also with really important messages mixed into it. So I really enjoyed this book. It was such a surprising experience because I picked it up on a whim. I had seen some people talk about it, but not thought like super highly of it. So yeah, it was a really surprising book, and I honestly really want a physical copy for myself because eventually I kind of want to reread it physically. So yeah, that was another book that I really enjoyed. Now the next book that I want to talk about is probably one that could make it into my favorites list if I would include it there, but I'm just gonna mention it here because I picked this one up as an audiobook on a whim. I haven't seen people talk about this book. I've seen the cover around, but I haven't seen a lot of like reviews and stuff, but I picked it up on a whim and I absolutely loved it, and I really want a physical copy for myself because it's just probably one of my favorite books of the year, to be honest. And it's Lesser by Raven Leilani. I've already talked about this book on my channel, I think, and this book follows Edie, who is a black young woman in her 20s in New York, and she has nothing figured out. She's sharing an apartment and she's in a job that she doesn't really like and has nothing to do with her, and she's also making really weird and inappropriate sexual choices. And then one day she meets Eric, who is an older man, and she realizes that he already has a family, he has a wife and a daughter, and basically Eddie finds herself into their life. And even though Eric and his wife are white, their daughter is adopted and is a young black girl, and so Edie finds herself in this complicated relationship with their daughter and in this family. And I think this book was a really good exploration of being in your 20s and having nothing figured out and not knowing what you want in life and what you want in relationships, and just like being lost in your 20s, because like I feel like being in your 20s is being lost, and that's why I love this book so much. I really like the writing as well, and I just don't feel like I read a lot of books about people my age, and so when I do and when I really like a book, I just really like it, because even though I'm not close to anything Edie was going through in the book, I still really related to her in other aspects of her life. And yeah, it was just a really good book. I feel like not a lot of people are talking about it, and it really surprised me. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was just phenomenal and short and sweet and really good. So yeah, I highly recommend this one. Now the next one is one that I read pretty recently, and I just feel like it's super underrated for the genre, and it's More Than Just a Pretty Face by Seed M. Masood. I read this one because of Casey's recommendation, because she has read it and she loved the book, and I feel like she was the only person who ever mentioned this book to me. I feel like I'm pretty in tune with YA contemporaries because it's the genre that I read the most of, but I have seen only Casey talk about this book, which is surprising because I really enjoyed this book as well. And this book follows Daniel, who isn't the brightest kid at school, and he wants to become a chef, but his father doesn't really approve of that for him. And so one day, to prove his father wrong and to prove to everyone that he's more than just a pretty face, he decides to enter this academic championship called the Renaissance Man that runs at his school every year. And to help him out with that, he meets a girl named Bisma, who is really smart and she's in college, but at the same time she's had some really troubled things happen in her past. But Bisma decides to help Daniel try to win Renaissance Man, and yeah, it's a really good book about falling in love and family expectations, and it was just so fun, and I love the chemistry between the two main characters, Daniel and Bisma, and I just love their romance, and I just really enjoyed this book. I feel like it's very underrated. I don't see a lot of people talk about it, and I wasn't surprised that I loved this book because I trust Casey's opinion, but at the same time, sometimes we really differ on books, especially like YA contemporaries and romance. So yeah, I was really surprised that I also enjoyed this book as much as she did. And yeah, this is a really good YA contemporary if you're looking for one. Super cute, super entertaining, and I really love the chemistry and the dialogue between the characters. So yeah. Now the next one I listened to as an audiobook as well, and it was The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Philia, and this is a collection of short stories about Black women and girls. Most of the stories involve church in some way or another, and I feel like with collections of short stories it's really easy to love some stories but then like really not like some others. But with this collection I feel like I love them all equally. They were all super interesting and super great, and I love how some were super short but really packed a punch, and some were longer but like were really like super interesting. Like all of them were super equally interesting and well done, and I was just like super invested into this. This is a really short audiobook. I think it was like 4 or 5 hours, and I also really like that because I love short books that are well executed, and I feel like this was one of them. I read this one because I saw Noel Gallagher read this one and really enjoyed it, so I decided to pick it up as an audiobook, but I really wasn't thinking much of it, and I ended up loving it. So yeah, this is another book that really surprised me and that I wasn't expecting to love it so much, but this is definitely a short story collection that I will recommend to people, because I've read some short story collections, especially this past year, and I feel like there's always some stories in the mix that I find really boring or that I really don't like, but this one was just like all around great. So yeah, this is one that I will definitely recommend and one that really surprised me this year. Now the last book that I wanted to talk about is Wild Tongues Can Be Tamed, 15 Voices from the Latinx Diaspora, and this is a YA anthology about the different experiences of the authors about being Latinx in America, and some of them about being Afro-Latinx in America. And it was a really enlightening experience to read from all of these authors about their experiences growing up, and about different stories about their families and about their culture. And honestly, I picked this one up because I just really enjoyed the cover. I think the cover is beautiful, so I was just like, oh, let me listen to this. I haven't seen anyone talk about it. Also, I saw that some authors that I really enjoy were in this anthology, like Elizabeth Acevedo and Edie Zavoy, so I was just like, let me pick this one up, let me start listening to it, and I just learned so much, and it was such a good experience, and I highly recommend that you pick this one up. So yeah, that was another book that I really enjoyed reading this year, and that really surprised me because I had no expectations whatsoever for it. So yeah, those were some of the books that surprised me the most this year, some that I wasn't expecting to love as much, some that I didn't even have any opinion on them, and yeah, some books that I really wanted to highlight, even though some of them are not like my favorite books of the year. They were still really great reads that I highly recommend. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe down below if you haven't, and I will see you on my next one. Bye!